مدیر مشترک مؤسسه بین‌المللی حفاظت حقوق بشر است و خودشون از دراویش گنابادی هستن. ایشون هم در مورد حقوق زنان تو ایران فعالیت کردن و ما از جنبه ایشون هم میشنویم، نظراتشون رو میشنویم. The current laws in Iran, even though are claimed to be Islamic or associated with Islam, are in reality contrary to Islamic principles, as they openly discriminate between men and women. For example, under Iranian law, the men have greater rights with regard to work and jobs, and by law can receive greater salary for the same job than women. Therefore, men are placed in a superior position in the workplace by the current Iranian laws. Another obvious example for gender discrimination is the lack of freedom of travel for married women, as a married woman cannot obtain a passport or an exit permit to leave the country until she has written permission from her husband. This restriction even applies to civil servants or members of the government who wish to travel for their work. This restriction exists because the current Iranian laws do not consider a married woman as an individual human being, but instead as a half of a person who must be obedient to her husband. However, the current laws are in reality in complete disagreement with the equality of men and women in Islam and the teachings of the Holy Quran, as the Quran has never given such a power to a Muslim man where he can forbid the travel of his wife or make her travel rely on his permission. It's clear that as the law stands, the inability of married women to travel without her husband's consent places a woman in a big disadvantage in terms of her individual independence and places her in a weaker position relative to man. However, one must be clear in these matters and realize that Sharia law, as expressed in the Quran, is not the root cause of these issues, but the cause lies in the continued reactionary these false beliefs over the years by the clergy and their wish to establish a society where all power is centralizing under the control of man. In fact, these lies have been so often repeated that nowadays they have become part of the general belief and considered to part of the Islamic principles. One must also note that other diverse social and ethnic groups who believe in religion other than the above Islamic State under the current Iranian totalitarian system known as Velayat Faqih and often regard as second or even third class citizen. Even the Sunni Muslims who are Muslims are victims of this religious apartheid system and face discrimination based on their religious behavior. Furthermore, Sufis and followers of the mystical paths, just like the Sunnis, are also not considered to be first-class citizens, for Sunni mosques and Sufi house of worshippers often are invaded and destroyed by the Basij paramilitary forces. Moreover, the Baha'is' rights are not even recognized in the Iranian judicial system. In such circumstances, the situation of women belonging to various religious minorities is very irregular, as in many cases they are doubly oppressed, for often they are oppressed both as the followers of other religions and also for being a woman. For example, often it is enough for a man who wishes to separate from his wife and not to forego his legal obligations to take her hand and abandon her in the middle of a street without any recourse by simply starting that his wife is not a follower of Islam or she has changed their religion. According to the Shahin Molaverdi, the advisor of the 11th Iranian government in regard of issue of women and families' rights, there are areas in the region of Sistan and Balochistan in southern Iran that in many Sunni villages where men have been executed, it has befallen on the women of the family to not only raise their children but also work and provide for them. Because of this situation, these villages have befallen to extreme poverty and lack of hope, so much so that they have been driven to life of drugs and addiction. Among these addicts, there are many women and young girls. Usually these women, after falling in the abyss of addiction, poverty and deprivation due to the need to satisfy their addiction, also fall into prostitution and corruption. So much so that there is growing trade in Iran where babies or children are openly sold, often for very little, where young mothers during their pregnancy meet with proposed customers and then sell their child, all the while their unborn child in their wombs. The buyers of these street children and orphans are also known to often brand these children with branding iron, just as a cattle farmer marks his livestock to show his ownership. These branded children are then rented out for hire. Often these street children and orphans are rented to gangs of homeless people who then travel with them while holding them in their arms and openly begging in the streets for cash, in the hope that with the child under their arms they will have better chance of playing on people's emotions. In Iran there is also a growing number of supervised children and women who live and sleep in cardboard boxes. Amongst these people there are ever-growing number of immigrations and asylum seekers who, due to abnormal conditions in their own country, have been forced to flee Iran. Usually these immigrants and asylum seekers will not possess any form of citizenship rights in Iran. Therefore, in general, the women under the Iranian law suffer from legal injustice, and women who are part of diverse religious and ethnic groups suffer from